My hand shook as I stared at the bank statement, the numbers screaming betrayal. $250,000, a loan in my name, one I'd never signed for. I'm John Whitaker, a retired accountant from Boise, Idaho, living quietly on a modest pension in a cozy bungalow. That morning, March 10th, 2025, the crisp letter from Boise Credit Union landed like a grenade in my mailbox. My reading glasses fogged as I traced a forged signature, my signature, etched with chilling precision. My daughter, Clara, the child I'd raised through scraped knees and college dreams, had done this. She and her husband, Nathan, had drained my life security to fund their glitzy world of private jets and diamond earrings. The betrayal cut deeper than any knife, a wound only a parent could understand. How could the girl who once called me her hero sell my future for a Gucci handbag? I had to know why. What secrets were they hiding behind their perfect Instagram lives? This wasn't just about money. It was about trust shattered in an instant. If this story hits you as hard as it hit me, please hit that like button, drop a comment about where you're watching from, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Don't forget to subscribe. I've got more stories like this, and you won't want to miss how this one unfolds. The coffee in my mug had gone cold, but the shock kept my heart racing. I sat at my small kitchen table, the morning sun filtering through lace curtains, casting shadows on the letterhead. Boise Credit Union, official and unyielding, listed my name, my address, and a loan origination date of February 25th, 2025. Monthly payments of $12,500 were already overdue, a debt I couldn't possibly cover on my $1,400 pension. My fingers fumbled for phone, dialing the bank's customer service. Each ring tightened the knot in my chest. Boise Credit Union, this is Sarah. How can I help you? Her voice was calm, oblivious to the storm brewing in my world. Sarah, it's John Whitaker. There's a loan on my account, $250,000. I never applied for it. A pause, then the sound of typing. Mr. Whitaker, the application was submitted online with your social security number and digital signature. Funds were deposited on February 26th and transferred to a joint account holder, Clara Dawson. My daughter's name hit like a thunderclap. Clara, my only child, who I'd added to my account years ago for emergencies after her mother's passing. I leaned against the counter, the room spinning. Transferred? To Clara's account. Sarah's voice softened. Yes, sir. The full amount went to her personal account the same day. I clutched the phone, my knuckles white. Clara, who'd hugged me at her wedding, promising to always be my little girl, had orchestrated this. Is everything okay, Mr. Whitaker? Sarah asked. Okay. My daughter had forged my name, stolen a fortune, and left me to drown in debt. I need to call you back. I managed. Hanging up, the silence in my bungalow was deafening, broken only by the tick of my old wall clock. I stared at the statement again, the forged signature mocking me. Clara had planned this, practiced it, executed it with cold calculation. Why? For what? I thought of her husband, Nathan, always flashing his Rolex and smug grin. Was this his idea, or were they in it together? The questions burned, but one thing was clear. I wasn't just a victim of fraud. I was a father betrayed, and I wouldn't let this go unanswered. The drive to Clara's house felt like a descent into a nightmare. Each mile tightened the vice around my heart. I'm John Whitaker, a retired accountant from Boise, Idaho, still reeling from the discovery of a $250,000 loan forged in my name by my own daughter, Clara, and her husband, Nathan. The betrayal stung worse than the financial ruin staring me down. As my old Toyota climbed the hill to their gated community, I rehearsed the confrontation, my hands gripping the steering wheel. Their house loomed ahead, a modern mansion with floor-to-ceiling windows and a Tesla parked in the driveway. Luxuries bought with my stolen future. What would Clara say when I faced her with the truth? Would she beg forgiveness? Or had she already buried our bond under her greed? I rang the doorbell, its chime echoing like a warning bell. Clara opened the door, her smile faltering. Dad? You didn't call. Her voice carried a nervous edge, her eyes darting behind me as if expecting an ambush. We need to talk, Clara. I stepped inside, the scent of expensive leather and polish wood hitting me. The living room screamed wealth. Artwork I couldn't afford, a chandelier glittering like a taunt. Nathan lounged on a sofa, scrolling his phone, his Rolex catching the light. "John, what's this about?" he asked, barely looking up. I pulled the bank statement from my jacket, unfolding it with deliberate calm. This, a $250,000 loan in my name. Care to explain why the funds ended up in your account, Clara? Her face drained of color, but Nathan's smirk didn't waver. Must be a bank error, old man. Happens all the time. His casual dismissal ignited a fire in me. "No error," I said, my voice steady despite the rage. "The bank confirmed you transferred the money, Clara. My signature was forged." She stammered, "Dad, we needed it. Nathan's business deals require a certain image. You always said family comes first." Her words twisted a knife, my own values thrown back at me to justify theft. Nathan stood, towering over me. "Look, John, you're scraping by in that tiny bungalow. What do you need credit for? You're not exactly living large." The cruelty landed like a slap. My daughter, my flesh and blood, stood silent as her husband reduced my life to insignificance. "Clara, is this true? You forged my name for his image?" Her eyes dropped, but Nathan answered for her. "You're old, John. You don't need the money. We do. It's just business. Business. My pension, my security, my trust, stolen for their vanity." I folded the statement, my hand steady now. "This isn't business, Nathan. It's fraud. And I'm not the father who lets his family destroy him." Their silence followed me as I walked out, the weight of their betrayal heavy, but fueling a resolve I hadn't felt in years. Clara's nervous glance at Nathan, as I left, hinted at secrets deeper than the loan. What else were they hiding? I drove back to my bungalow, the Boise skyline fading in my rear view, knowing this confrontation was just beginning. My daughter had underestimated the man who taught her to balance a checkbook, and I was ready to balance the scales. The betrayal cut deep, but it was the pattern that chilled me to the bone. I'm John Whitaker, a retired accountant from Boise, Idaho, still grappling with the sting of my daughter Clara forging my signature for a $250,000 loan. Her husband Nathan's smug dismissal at their mansion only hardened my resolve. Sitting at my kitchen table, the bank statement glaring up at me, I leaned on 40 years of number crunching to uncover the truth. Clara wasn't just a desperate daughter. She was a mastermind, weaving a web of fraud that stretched far beyond me. What else had she done? Who else had she hurt? The questions gnawed as I sipped cold coffee, the Boise morning light casting long shadows across my modest bungalow. I started where I always did. The numbers. My old laptop hummed as I accessed my bank's online portal, cross-referencing Clara's account activity. The $250,000 transfer was just the tip of the iceberg. Digging through public records of my old contacts at Boise Credit Union, I found traces of other applications. Smaller loans, denied for inconsistent documentation, but all bearing my name or social security number. Clara had been practicing, refining her forgery over months, maybe years. Then I stumbled on something worse. Credit inquiries at 3 other banks, Idaho First, Mountain West, and Pioneer Trust, none of which I'd authorized. Each application listed Clara or Nathan as joint applicants, with signatures eerily close to mine. I called an old colleague, Evelyn Harper, who'd moved to fraud detection at Idaho First. "John, I hate to say it," she whispered over the phone, "but Clara's been busy. We flagged 2 applications last year for suspicious signatures. They used your name as a co-signer, claiming it was for family medical expenses. We declined them, but I heard similar stories from Pioneer Trust." My stomach churned. Family medical expenses? My health was fine, but Clara had spun lies to exploit trust. Evelyn sent me redacted credit reports, revealing a pattern. Clara targeted elderly neighbors, family friends, anyone whose goodwill she could manipulate. She'd forged documents for loans as small as $5,000, building up to the $250,000 jackpot. The scope of her deceit was staggering. I jotted names on a legal pad. Mrs. Agnes Tillman, a widowed librarian who baked Clara cookies every Christmas. Tom Vernon, a retired teacher who tutored her in high school. Each had been fed sob stories about my ailing health or Nathan's business ventures. Clara's fraud wasn't impulsive. It was calculated, a cold-blooded scheme preying on the vulnerable. My hand shook as I wrote, not from fear but from a growing fury. How many lives had she appended for her designer dresses and Nathan's Tesla? I drove to Agnes's house that afternoon, the Boise River glinting nearby, a cruel contrast to the storm inside me. Her eyes widened at the loan documents I showed her. Clara said you needed surgery, John. She begged me to co-sign a $10,000 loan for you. The lie stung, but Agnes's trembling voice hurt more. She faced foreclosure because of Clara's deceit. We're not alone, I told her, my voice steady. She's done this to others, but I'm going to stop her. Agnes's nod was small, but it lit a spark. Clara thought she'd outsmarted us all, but she didn't know the fight I was building. Her web of lies was unraveling, and I was ready to pull the threads. The weight of Clara's betrayal pressed harder as I uncovered the scope of her fraud, but it was the faces of her victims that turned my anger into purpose. I'm John Whitaker, a retired accountant in Boise, Idaho, piecing together my daughter's calculated scheme to forge my name for a $250,000 loan and target others with her lies. My kitchen table, once a place of morning coffee, now held a growing stack of evidence. Credit reports, bank records, and a list of names Clara had deceived. Each name was a story, a life appended by her greed, and I knew I couldn't fight this alone. The Boise dusk settled outside my bungalow, casting a soft glow on my legal pad, where I sketched a plan to unite her victims. Could we turn our shared pain into a force strong enough to bring her down? I started with Agnes Tillman, the widowed librarian who'd lost her savings to Clara's lies about my medical emergency. Over tea in her cluttered living room, she shared names of others Clara had approached. Tom Vernon, the retired teacher, Sarah Lyle, a church volunteer, and even old Mr. Gideon Pratt, who'd known Clara since she was a child. She cried, John. Agnes said, her voice breaking, told me you were too proud to ask for help. The manipulation was sickening, but it was also a pattern, a playbook Clara used on us all. I proposed a meeting, a coalition to share our stories and fight back. Agnes's eyes, weary with worry, lit with hope. Count me in, she whispered. By Wednesday, I gathered 7 victims in a community center room, the air thick with shared betrayal. Tom, who'd lent Clara $7,000 for a business venture. Sarah, facing eviction after guaranteeing Clara's lease. Gideon, who'd mortgaged his home for her fake charity. Each story mirrored mine. Sob stories, forged signatures, stolen trust. I stood at a whiteboard, mapping the timeline like a financial audit. Loan applications from 2023, escalating to the $250,000 heist in February 2025. This isn't just about us, I said, my voice steady but burning. Clara and Nathan preyed on our trust, our love for family, our community. Together, we can expose them. The room buzzed with resolve. Sarah clutched a photo of her kids, vowed to fight for their future. Gideon, frail but fierce, slammed his fist on the table. She won't get away with this. I shared the credit reports Evelyn had sent, showing Clara's attempts at 4 banks, each with forged documents. The victims' stories wove a tapestry of deception, but also strength. We weren't isolated anymore. We were a force, bound by a common wound and a shared goal. I promised to connect them with a lawyer, someone who could turn our evidence into justice. As we left, Tom gripped my hand. You're giving us hope, John. We thought we were alone. His words stayed with me as I drove home, the Boise skyline twinkling against the night. Clara and Nathan thought they'd silence us with their lies, but they'd underestimated the power of a community united. My daughter's betrayal had broken my heart, but it had also forged a new family, one ready to fight. What secrets would we uncover next? Clara's house of cards was trembling, and I was ready to pull it down. The fight was on, and my daughter Clara's house of lies was starting to crack. I'm John Whitaker, a retired accountant in Boise, Idaho, leading a coalition of 7 victims defrauded by Clara and her husband Nathan, including a $250,000 loan forged in my name. Our community center meeting had forged us into a united front, but I needed more than bank records to bring them down. Clara's betrayal wasn't just financial, it was personal, and I suspected she was hiding something darker. Armed with my old Canon camera and a hunch, I followed her, determined to uncover the truth. What I found was worse than I'd imagined. A secret so explosive it could shatter her marriage and her schemes in one blow. Was I ready to confront her with the evidence that could change everything? I parked 3 blocks from Clara's mansion on a crisp Thursday morning, my thermos of coffee steaming in the chilly Boise air. At 11:15, Clara emerged, her designer sunglasses glinting as she slid into her sleek Audi, bought no doubt with my stolen money. I tailed her to the upscale River Park Square, my heart pounding like I was a detective in a noir film. At Nordstrom, she lingered in the jewelry section, a sales clerk fawning over her as she picked out a $3,200 Rolex. Not for Nathan, whose cheap Timex I'd seen at their house. My camera clicked through the store window, capturing her handing over a credit card tied to the stolen funds. Who was this gift for? By 1 o'clock, she drove to Il Forno, an Italian bistro downtown. I positioned myself across the street, my lens trained on her table. A man joined her, mid-30s, sharp suit, too polished for Boise's casual vibe. His name, I'd later learn, was Ethan Caldwell. Their greeting wasn't friendly. It was intimate, a lingering kiss that made my stomach lurch. Claire presented the Rolex, fastening it on his wrist with a smile that screamed betrayal. My camera caught every moment, their laughter, her hand on his cheek, the glint of her wedding ring as she leaned into him. This wasn't just an affair. It was a partnership funded by fraud. I followed them to the Davenport Hotel bar, where Clara ordered $50, a glass champagne. "Nathan will never know where the money goes," she said, her voice carrying across the quiet lobby. Ethan raised his glass, smirking. "To stupid husbands and easy cash." My lens froze a moment, their toast a damning confession. Back home, I printed the photos, each one a dagger to Nathan's illusion of loyalty. The next day, I met them at Il Forno again, my phone loaded with evidence. "Nathan, you need to see this," I said, sliding the phone across the table. The images of Clara and Ethan, laughing over stolen luxury, hit him like a freight train. His face crumpled, but Clara's eyes turned to ice. "These are fake, Dad. You're desperate," she snapped, her voice a mix of panic and defiance. Nathan stared at the photos, his hands shaking. "Clara, that's your ring. Your smile." She gripped his arm, spinning lies about Photoshop and my mental decline. But the cracks were showing. Nathan's belief in her was fraying, and I saw the fear in her eyes. She'd underestimated me, thinking I'd stay broken. But these photos were just the start. What would happen when Nathan learned the full scope of her double life? The truth was closing in, and I was ready to push harder. The photographs of Clara's affair burned in my pocket, but they were only half the battle. I'm John Whitaker, a retired accountant from Boise, Idaho, leading a coalition of 7 victims defrauded by my daughter Clara and her husband Nathan, including a $250,000 loan forged in my name. Those images of Clara with her lover, Ethan Caldwell, spending stolen money on lavish gifts had shaken Nathan's trust, but I needed more than emotional leverage to bring them down. My 40 years in finance taught me that justice requires airtight evidence, and I was building a case to ensure Clara's lies couldn't escape the law. Could I turn our coalition's pain into a legal hammer strong enough to crush their schemes? The Boise skyline loomed as I drove downtown, ready to make the next move. I met Patricia Conway, a fraud prosecutor with a reputation for dismantling financial crimes, at her office near the courthouse. The air smelled of old books and determination as I spread my evidence across her desk. Bank statements, credit reports, forged signatures, and the damning photos of Clara's affair. "John, this is meticulous," Patricia said, her eyes scanning the documents. "You've built a case most attorneys would envy." I'd mapped Clara's fraud across 4 banks: Idaho First, Mountain West, Pioneer Trust, and Boise Credit Union, showing $350,000 in attempted loans, with $250,000 funded. The victim testimonies, from Agnes Tillman's foreclosure fears to Tom Vernon's lost savings, painted a portrait of calculated cruelty. "This isn't just fraud," I said, my voice steady but heavy. "It's elder abuse, identity theft, a betrayal of trust." Patricia nodded, her pen flying across a legal pad. "We've got enough for federal wire fraud charges, plus state-level identity theft and financial exploitation. The photos tie Clara's personal motives to the crime. Spending stolen funds on affairs strengthens the intent to defraud." She leaned forward, her gaze sharp. "If we move fast, we can file criminal charges by Monday and a civil suit for restitution by Tuesday. Your coalition makes this a slam dunk." The word restitution sparked hope. Could we recover the money, the security Clara stole from us? I handed her Ethan Caldwell's name, his signature appearing on loan applications alongside Clara's. "He's complicit," I said. "They're partners in this." Back home, I called the coalition, updating them on the legal plan. Agnes's voice trembled with relief. "You're giving us our lives back, John." Tom added, "Clara thought we were easy marks, but you've turned the tables." Their trust fueled me, but so did the memory of Clara's cold denial at El Forno, claiming my photos were fake. She thought she could outmaneuver me, but she didn't know the machine I'd set in motion. Patricia's team was already drafting subpoenas for bank records and preparing to freeze Clara and Nathan's accounts. The photos, combined with our testimonies, would expose their lavish lifestyle as a house of cards built on stolen dreams. As I sat in my bungalow, the Boise River's distant murmur calming my nerves, I felt the weight of what was coming. Clara and Nathan's world was about to collapse under the legal onslaught we'd prepared. But what would happen when Nathan faced the full truth? Not just a Clara's affair, but her role as a mastermind. The courtroom loomed, and I was ready to see justice served, step by calculated step. The legal gears were turning, and I could feel the weight of justice closing in. I'm John Whitaker, a retired accountant from Boise, Idaho, leading a coalition of 7 victims defrauded by my daughter Clara and her husband Nathan, who forged my name for a $250,000 loan. The photographs of Clara's affair with Ethan Caldwell, funded by stolen money, had cracked Nathan's denial, but it was the courtroom where their lives would finally collapse. My evidence, bank records, victim testimonies, and those damning images had set the stage for a reckoning. As I sat in my bungalow, the Boise skyline glowing faintly through my window, I wondered, would Clara and Nathan face the consequences they deserved, or would their manipulations slip through the cracks one last time? Monday morning, I stood outside the Ada County Courthouse, my old briefcase heavy with the evidence Patricia Conway, our fraud prosecutor, had called bulletproof. Inside, our coalition filled the gallery. Agnes Tillman, Tom Vernon, Sarah Lyle, and the others, their faces a mix of resolve and exhaustion. Nathan sat alone at the defendant's table, his public defender shuffling papers, outmatched before the hearing began. Clara was nowhere in sight, her absence a loud confession. Judge Eleanor Ramsey entered, her presence commanding silence. "Mr. Nathan Dawson," she said, her voice like steel, "you face charges of identity theft, bank fraud, and financial exploitation of the elderly. How you plead?" Nathan's head bowed. "Guilty, Your Honor." The words landed like a gavel in my chest. My son-in-law, once so smug, was broken. Patricia stood, her tone measured but fierce. "Your Honor, the prosecution presents evidence of systematic fraud spanning 2 years, defrauding 7 victims of $350,000. Mr. Whitaker's investigation, bank records, forged signatures, and surveillance photos proves the defendant's intent." She gestured to me, and I felt the coalition's eyes on me, their trust a quiet strength. The judge reviewed our documents, her brow furrowing at the photos of Clara's lavish spending on Ethan. "This is a grave abuse of trust," she said. "Mr. Dawson, you are sentenced to 4 years probation, 600 hours of community service, and full restitution of $350,000. All assets will be liquidated and wages garnished until repayment is complete." The courtroom exhaled. Agnes gripped my hand, tears in her eyes. But the victory wasn't just ours. That afternoon, Patricia called with news. Clara had been suspended from her marketing job after I sent her employer the photos and fraud summary. Her social circle was crumbling too. Her parents, her friends, even her sister had received my envelopes with evidence of her affair and crimes. By evening, Nathan called, his voice raw. "Clara left me, John. She admitted everything. Ethan, the loans, using me to get to your accounts. I'm losing the house, my car, everything." His panic was real, but so was the justice. "You chose this, Nathan." I said, "You both did." Clara's world was imploding. Her desperate voicemail came next. "Dad, please, I'm losing my job, my friends. Stop this." But I didn't stop. She'd spent my life savings on Ethan's Rolex and champagne, dismissing my years as worthless. Now, her career, her reputation, her marriage, gone. The consequences were poetic, relentless, and final. But as I hung up, a question lingered. Would Clara try one last desperate move to save herself, or was her empire of lies truly finished? The courtroom victory was still fresh, but it was a transformation inside me that felt like the real triumph. I'm John Whitaker, a retired accountant from Boise, Idaho, who turned my daughter Clara's betrayal, forging my name for a $250,000 loan, into a fight for justice. With Nathan's guilty plea and Clara's world collapsing under the weight of her exposed affair and fraud, I stood at the edge of something new. My bungalow's quiet kitchen, once a place of shock and heartbreak, now held a stack of letters from other fraud victims inspired by our story. Could my pain become a beacon for others? As the Boise sunset painted my walls gold, I reflected on how far I'd come, from a broken father to a leader who'd shown a community how to fight back. Our case made headlines in the Idaho Statesman. Retired accountant leads coalition to expose family fraud. The article detailed how my coalition of 7 victims, Agnes, Tom, Sarah, and others, had turned Clara and Nathan's schemes into a textbook case of justice. My 40 years of financial expertise had built an unshakable case. Bank records, forged signatures, surveillance photos of Clara's lavish gifts to Ethan Caldwell. But it wasn't just about evidence. It was about showing the world that betrayal, even from family, doesn't have to break you. I'd taken Clara's dismissal of my worthless years and turned it into a legacy of empowerment. Strangers now wrote to me, asking how to organize their own coalitions, how to face their own betrayers. I met with Patricia Conway one last time, her office a quiet contrast to the courthouse's intensity. "John, you've set a precedent," she said, sliding a restitution schedule across her desk. The $350,000 will be repaid through Nathan's asset liquidation, his Tesla, their mansion, Clara's jewelry, all sold to restore what they'd stolen. Your work gave these victims their lives back. I thought of Agnes, who could keep her home, and Sarah, who'd see her kids through college. My own pension was secure again, but the real victory was a coalition's strength. We'd been preyed upon, but together, we'd become predators of justice. Back home, I sifted through the letters, each one a story of loss seeking hope. A widow in Nampa, a veteran in Meridian. People Clara's schemes hadn't touched, but whose pain echoed ours. I began drafting replies, sharing the steps we'd taken. Gather evidence, unite victims, find a prosecutor like Patricia. My modest life, once mocked by Clara and Nathan, felt rich with purpose. I wasn't just a retired accountant anymore. I was a guide for those fighting their own battles. Clara's final voicemail, a tearful plea for mercy, sat unanswered. She'd chosen Ethan and lies over family. Nathan had chosen her over truth. Their consequences were theirs to bear. As I sat by my window, the Boise River's steady flow, a reminder of time's persistence, I felt peace. My daughter had broken my trust, but she'd also given me a mission. The system worked because I'd used it methodically, relentlessly, like the accountant I'd always been. What would my next chapter hold? For now, I was content knowing I'd turned betrayal into a blueprint for justice. The sun dipped below the Boise horizon, casting a warm glow over my small bungalow, where I sat with a cup of coffee and a heart finally at rest. I'm John Whitaker, and this journey, from the sting of Clara's betrayal to the triumph of justice, has changed me. The $250,000 loan she forged in my name, the lies she spun with Nathan, the affair with Ethan Caldwell, all of it led to a courtroom victory that restored our coalition's stolen futures. But more than that, it gave me purpose. Those letters from fraud victims across Idaho, asking for guidance, remind me that pain can forge strength. I've learned that family isn't just blood. It's the community you build, the people you lift up when trust is shattered. My modest life, once mocked, now feels like a lighthouse for others lost in their own storms. Justice isn't just about punishment. It's about rebuilding what was broken, one methodical step at a time. I'll keep answering those letters, sharing our story. Because if I can turn betrayal into hope, so can you. If this story moved you, please hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And drop a comment about where you're watching from, Boise, beyond, or somewhere in between. Subscribe to the channel for more stories of resilience and justice. And click the box on the left for the next tale. Thank you for joining me on this journey.